It's a great pleasure to be with you today. I know these are very difficult times. We're going to be holding a series of webinars to help you learn how to get the most out of MaxiFi Planner, the software tool, which is really unique and can really help you financially in these incredibly tough times. So I hope that you'll be on the lookout for our emails. Also on our website, you can click under at the top, under some of the menu items at the top where it'll say webinar under households and financial planners to see the schedule of the webinars that we'll be doing periodically. So this is the first of a series, and we hope it goes well. The idea for today's webinar is to basically make sure that everybody is on the same page with respect to understanding how the program basically works and knows how to basically navigate the program. There's lots of capacity in the program. We've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible, but when you have the potential to do a lot of things, then you have to kind of spend a little time seeing how to actually do X, Y, and Z. But we continue to improve the software, put up updates, upgrades to make it ever more user-friendly. We've had an overwhelming response to this, well, to the webinar. I think we have over 1,300 people are registered. Not everybody I know will be able to come to this live version of the webinar, but we're going to have a video of it, and we will be transmitting the video and also a PowerPoint after the webinar is over, so people can come and they'll be able to get it in their inbox and take a look at this information, but they'll also be able to come back to our website and see our webinars that we've run in the past. I'll be doing some of them, but there'll also be other people from the company who will be conducting some of the webinars. And we'll also have some financial planners who volunteer to do webinars. And also a key thing is that after about 45 minutes or so, I'm going to stop talking and respond to the questions, or at least stop presenting, and I'll respond to the questions that you've posed. So if you can text your questions, I think under your control panel, you should have a way to text them. And my son Alex, who's one of the employees of the company, will be reading me the questions that you have. So I'll try and answer as many questions, and we'll go through till at least 3:30 answering questions, and hopefully that will handle most questions, and if not, we'll get to those questions in the future. And I'm also going to give you my email address. If you have something pressing, you can always email me. We love to be in touch with the customers. We have a customer support system that's very well looked after, and we try and do a really good job on that. So if you do have questions, please let us know one way or the other. And just to repeat, we have customers on this call who are longtime users of our software. We started the company back in 1993, and we came out with a download program, which we're still marketing, which is called ES Planner, Economic Security Planner. And we've had customers for, I would say, at least 20 years who have been using that program, and then have graduated up to this MaxiFi tool, which is not a download tool, as you know, but a online tool, and you can run it from any browser, from any laptop. You can run it on your cell phone, on your iPad. So we've come a long way, but we've been very careful not to try and kind of partner with anybody that we didn't think was going to respect the integrity of what we're trying to do, which is provide extremely high quality suggestions. Just the calculations of Social Security are a nightmare to get exactly right. We've spent over a decade really with one person, one top engineer, focused almost exclusively on that problem. So we are very fastidious and very quality oriented, and we haven't chosen to partner with anyone because we wanted to make sure that nobody undermined what we're trying to present to the public. We're really extremely interested in, we're really focused to a very high degree, I think really almost the only degree, on making sure that we provide appropriate suggestions. So the people on this webinar range from people that have been using the program, for, as I said, for about 20 years or a version of it, to people that just bought it last week, and maybe people bought it a year ago and have kind of been slow to actually get involved in using it. So I want to be kind of conscious of all the types of people on this webinar, on this call, and try and provide something that's of value to everybody. So let me kind of walk you through this slideshow very quickly, and then I'm going to demo the program and start showing you some of the interface operations that you may or may not be familiar with, but if you are familiar, just bear with me as we get toward the end of the actual presentation of the software. I'm going to show you a couple pretty amazing things that you can do with the program to raise, and at least in this case, in this particular sample couple's situation, how one can dramatically improve their financial lives. So I'm going to give you a bit of a teaser, 3 different teasers about how you can use the program to potentially help improve your own finances. Anyway, economics-based financial planning is what we're about. We are extremely different from all the other financial tools on the planet. The economics-based financial planning that goes back really to the 1920s by work by Irving Fisher, a Yale economist, who he's famous for miscalling the crash in '29. He projected that stocks were just going to stay fine and there's not going to be any decline. And of course, several years later, they were 86% below their peak. So, but he is really the father of life cycle consumption smoothing. And then Franco Modigliani, Richard Bloomberg. Franco received the Nobel Prize in economics for work on the empirical side of consumption smoothing. And the consumption smoothing idea is simply that you are you're trying to have a smooth living standard per household member, regardless of how long you live. So it's trying to have a sustainable living standard, and people are interested in having a sustainable living standard because they really don't want to be eating cat food when they're 90, or starving when they're young in order to have a great party when they're 85 and maybe not even make it to that point. So this is called consumption smoothing, trying to spread your resources through time so that you can have a smooth living standard. The program is going to find for any inputs the highest level of spending a household can sustain for life. I will now take you through the program and and the rest of the slides here and kind of give you a graphic picture of what's involved here. Earnings, as we know, especially these days, can be highly erratic. A lot of us are losing our jobs. We have like 30 million people unemployed right now. It's really just terrible for many, many households. So earnings fluctuate, but if you, apart from the uncertainty of earnings, if you realize that you might be taking time off to raise a family, you want to have a smooth living standard. So what you don't want to do is adjust your spending up and down based on how your income or your special expenses change through time. You want to try and adjust your saving and dissaving to have a smooth living standard. Now, there's lots of interconnected things going on when it comes to consumption smoothing. You have some initial assets, you have income coming in. You might have alimony payments. You might have some special expenses like alimony payments. You could be on the other side of that coin. The spending here includes your discretionary spending, which is all the spending that you're not forced to do. And some of the spending you're forced to do is to pay for taxes and pay for housing. That's what we call fixed spending, and any special expenses like alimony or college support for your kids. Those would be off the top fixed expenses. But so the consumption smoothing is with respect to your discretionary spending, the spending that's left over. And the program has to figure out how much life insurance you need. So in case you or your spouse or your partner dies, the survivors will have the same living standard to the dollar for the rest of their lives. And this is really a unique thing. No other software program calculates what your sustainable spending is, and therefore has any idea really of what life insurance you need to maintain that sustainable spending standard, because they don't know what that is. They don't have a methodology for figuring out what your sustainable living standard is, as far as I understand it. Now, MaxiFi is doing a lot of things. It's giving you a full lifetime financial plan in the process of doing this consumption smoothing. It's finding your highest sustainable living standard. It's calculating your life insurance needs to protect your survivors. It's figuring out how to potentially dramatically raise your lifetime spending. That's to say your annual living standard, and do so safely, not by telling you to go and make a killing in the stock market. We know how well that's been working out of late. Now, in order to get all this right, you need to be extremely careful about tax and benefit policies like Social Security, which has 2,728 rules governing its 12 benefits, and then there are hundreds of thousands of rules about those benefits in its program operating manual system. So we have the code for our software, if you printed it out, would take up about 7 reams of paper. And a large part of that code, no, well, not a whole ream, I don't think, but maybe half a ream, would be the code we've written to deal with Social Security, with the earnings test, the delayed retirement credit, the ability to suspend your benefits, survivor, but widow's benefits, divorcee widow's benefits, disabled child benefits, child and care spouse benefits. All these things have their own provisions, rules that affect whether or not you can get them. For example, if you remarry before age 60, you're out of luck in terms of collecting benefits on if you're still married, on your former, let's say, deceased spouse. But if you marry a day after age 60, or exactly when you turn age 60, you can collect on your deceased spouse. And you can collect spouse benefits. So there are very detailed provisions about taxes, state taxes, Medicare benefit premiums, and that we have to incorporate to do a good job by you. The software is using something called iterative dynamic programming, which has got 3 major programs that are talking back and forth to each other to send data to each other. We received a patent for this many years ago, so it's a very unique methodology. You can see from the output that it's working to the dollar. In other words, it's extremely precise. There's no question that it's working perfectly correctly. And just to reiterate, this is the only financial planning tool that abides by what economists say you should do when it comes to financial planning. So we're the planet's only economics-based financial planning tool. Now, this is just a little graphic that says, kind of repeats some of the things I just said. I'm not going to take you through it for the sake of time, but it's raising your living standard, making sure you have life insurance, finding the fixed and discretionary spending levels you're going to be experiencing, incorporating all the different details of the federal government and the state government's treatments, FICA taxes, you name it, high income Medicare Part B premiums, high income Medicare, labor income taxes and asset income taxes. There's also, and we're going to get to this in a future webinar, a very powerful way for looking at the risk you're experiencing when you're taking on when you invest in risky assets like stocks, and these days even long-term bonds might be somewhat risky. So we're going to, and also real estate can be risky. So we're going to show you Monte Carlo living standard simulations that show you all kind of different trajectories of your living standard that you might experience given how you're investing your money. And that's going to come in a future webinar. And then we're going to show how these different trajectories of your living standard that you might experience can be, first of all, controlled by how aggressively you invest, but also how aggressively you spend along the way. And also we can show you how economists will take all these trajectory results, and we run 500 Monte Carlo trajectories, how we can take those results and combine them into a single number that tells you about your kind of average lifetime happiness if you invest in this particular manner and spend in this particular manner. And then you can compare that with other investment and spending strategies and try and come up with an idea of what's best to do when it comes to, you know, whether I should hold 80% stock or 20% stock and 20% bonds or 80% bonds. So this is really a fantastically powerful thing we've added to the software in the last year. And you can also use the program to think about when to retire, about housing decisions. We're going to illustrate those two things today, about career choice. So lots of possible things to look at, paying off your mortgage early, withdrawing. I wrote a column which, if you go to, we have columns posted now on the website that I've been writing for Forbes and different outlets about financial planning using MaxiFi, and one of them got about 500,000 views, which is looking at the idea of cashing out your retirement account money and using it to pay off your mortgage, because mortgage interest rates haven't come down, but as we know, safe rates, interest rates, treasury bond rates have come down dramatically, and so there's an arbitrage possibility here, an opportunity to basically get a high real return, relatively high in this environment, real return just by paying off your mortgage. Now, I'm not going to go through all this, but we're asking for as few a set of inputs as needed to get a basic plan rolling, and then you can add inputs, and we try and make the input screens easy to handle, and then we have different reports which I'll take you through as we go along. Now, the base case I'm going to start out with, as I quickly move now to showing you the program, it involves two people, Jack and Sarah, a married couple. They're 52. They have two kids, Jane, 17, Alex is 15. Jack's earning 50,000, Sarah's earning 200,000. They're going to retire and take Social Security at 62. They live in California in a $700,000 house. They have a $500,000 mortgage, and they have 300,000 in the case of Jack in retirement accounts, and Sarah has 750,000 in their 401ks, and they have $50,000 in a checking account. So let me stop the slideshow there, and then go to the program here, which is oh, that's funny. Why is it saying I can't access my own program? Okay. So I've set up this case, Jack and Sarah, and I just want to, right before, just for 2 seconds, I want to just show, in case anybody is a new user, if they're a financial planner, they would see this interface where we can run lots of different families. But if you're a household, you wouldn't have this exact interface. You wouldn't be able to open up a client, start a new client. But what you would see when you first started running the program is exactly this screen. And you would get, it says, you know, you're going to enter your basic information. You're going to enter your financial details. So the basic information is about your household, you know, who's in the household, what are their ages, do you have any kids, when do you get married, that kind of thing. and then you're going to view your plan. That's the basic drill here. And then when you get started, it's going to be Joe, you're going to enter a name, Joe Smith. And this program works, just in case you haven't really run this program at all, it works just like TurboTax. You're asked one question after another, and it's very easy. Do you have kids? No. Great, now we've collected information. Now we ask you about your name, and then we get to your spouse or partner's name, and we talked about the kids, and then we start asking bit by bit about your financial details. So that's the way the program basically works. I'm not going to take you through that. You can see it's very easy to enter data. And this is a profile that we set up called Jack and Jane. And the couple, the inputs you can look at right here, he has the 50,000 if you wanted to edit that or change anything. He's not self-employed. He is covered. His job is covered by Social Security. He does earn 50,000 from 2020 to 2030 when he retires. If you wanted to edit that, you would just click this little edit button. And so that's the way the inputting works. Social Security, I've projected earnings for him, for Jack, to get him up to about 50,000 by the time he is, at his current age. And then there's retirement account information. Sarah, there's similar information. She's making, as I said, 200,000. At the household level, we have the house. They have, under this case, no plans to sell the house, so they'll die with the house intact. They have regular assets of 50,000. Their Social Security strategies are both going to take Social Security at 62. And we have all kinds of help. If you get to a page and something's not clear, these question marks mean that you can click on that and get help right away, learn what's going on there. You can also go to this help center. There are videos that we have that in the help center. There's video tutorials, a whole bunch, and we're going to be adding to them. We might end up with 30 different tutorials. This is just a walkthrough like the kind I'm doing. We have how to find help, all the different types of help we have, Roth conversion, alternative profiles, reading reports, how to read the reports, understand them. So that's these videos are worth taking a look at. Now back to Jack and Sarah. I just want to show you one other important thing. So click everywhere you can possibly click, because it cannot hurt to click on something, because you're going to find maybe I can adjust something by clicking on something. For example, if I click on settings and assumptions, we have lots of inputs about your rates of return, for example. Here I'm assuming based on current long-term Treasury bond rates and the implied inflation rate, that the Treasury bond rate is 1.25% and the inflation rate is 1.25. And I'm assuming that for retirement accounts for both spouses and for 529 accounts, they don't have any in this case, and also on reserve funds if they had any. And then there's other, things about other questions about retirement accounts. When will the smooth withdrawals, if you take them, begin? And by the way, there's also inputs under here under retirement accounts where you can specify special withdrawals if you want to do that. At some point, we will be kind of combining all the retirement account inputs into one place. These are kind of more basic inputs, and that's why we've separated them out to make it as simple as possible. The Social Security and Medicare questions: will Social Security benefits be cut? Will Medicare benefits be increased? Will people enroll in Medicare, and at what ages? Will taxes be increased? Do you have any unrealized capital gains? We ask about mutual muni bond holdings. Is your reserve fund going to be taxed? Lots of things you should really go take a look at. Do you want your survivors to have a higher living standard or a lower living standard? Can you, and then we have questions about whether you want to have a smooth living standard as well. You can tell the program you don't want to have a smooth living standard. the baseline assumption is that the index for your living standard is 100, but if you wanted it to start at age 75, let's say, and drop by 0.25% every year, you can easily enter that. And then there's some other assumptions about whether or not, for example, you want your life insurance you want to not buy any life insurance after a certain age because it's just too expensive. So you can cut off the programs calculating how much life insurance you need. And also a very important thing is how much can you borrow? We're assuming you can borrow nothing, but and then if you're going to sell your home, what's the commission rate going to be? We have default values for everything, but you may want to change those. Now, another thing, I said click on everything. If you click on, you might not think you could click on this person's name, Jack, but when you do, you can change the maximum age of life to whatever you want, retirement age, the gender. Here again, then you can go back and kind of easily edit some of these other inputs. And then this is also very important. You might have, as you went through the TurboTax-alike interface, you may have dismissed certain items. You might have said, well, pensions, I'm not going to deal with those right now. I just want to get a base plan set up. I do have a small pension. I'm going to come back to it later. Well, here's how to do it. Just click on Jack, go to the dismissed item, click on pensions, enter the data, and then it's going to show up under Jack's inputs as pensions. So this is how you restore items that you've dismissed. Same thing with Sarah, and same thing with the household or just real estate, special receipts, special expenses, 529 plans. All these things will show up, and you can restore them. Okay, so, and then children, of course, you can add children. In this case, Jack and Sarah have 2 children, one is 17 and one is 15. So they're still in the household. Now, I'm going to run their basic plan. So when you hit reports, you see a bunch of report options. The base plan and the maximized plan are being calculated based on the assumption that you're going to get for sure the rate of return that's specified under settings and assumptions. And it could be a different rate of return for your regular assets versus your retirement accounts versus your 529, but there's this assumption that what you put in there is going to happen for sure. This Monte Carlo risk analysis is taking a different approach. It's saying the household that's using this program is actually investing at risk. So therefore, we have to look at all the different top possible living standard trajectories they might experience, and then help them think about how they want to adjust their portfolio in that context. But these first 2 plans that I'm going to talk to you about today, and mostly the base plan, is dealing with a situation where there is no rate of return risk. And so we caution people to use conservative rates of return based on what the market is saying. And the market is saying that you can get a 0% real return right now, given what's happened with the whole virus and the change in financial conditions. So that's real return is inflation adjusted. So I'm assuming that you can earn what you can earn today on the market, which is around 1.25% on a 30-year Treasury bond. But since the inflation indexed bond return is about 0, that implies that the projected inflation rate is also 1.25%. So that's what's under settings and assumptions. Now let me run this. Let me just show one other thing, which is if you want to take a look at the survivor reports and make sure that we're coming up with the right life insurance recommendations, you can run this report and specify who's going to be the survivor and then kill them off at a certain age and see how you'll do as a survivor, and see that your living standard will be the same as a survivor or higher than in the case of the base plan, assuming that you're letting the software calculate life insurance right up to the year that you specify that somebody's going to die. Now, why would the living standard be higher? Well, it could be that you don't actually need any living standard. So if Sarah dies, Jack's living standard could be higher because let's say she dies at 68. She's already stopped working. He doesn't need life insurance to protect him and the kids from, well, the kids will be out of the household at that point, but he doesn't need life insurance to protect himself from her dime because her earnings have ended. So if she were to pass away, it would be one person sharing the combined assets, and his living standard will actually be higher. So you'll see that in a second. Anyway, we have that, and we also have this comparison report, which I'm going to show you momentarily, that you can run as well. So let me run the base report. And again, we do have a Q&A period for about starting in about 15 or so minutes. So if you do have questions about anything whatsoever, including the economy, if you want to, ask a quick question or so about, maybe you don't have the opportunity to talk to an economist every day about what's going on, I'm happy to talk about that. So this is the first thing you see, and again, most of you are familiar with this, but the way we set this up is as a wizard. We kind of say, look, here's your lifetime income. You've got these resources, labor income. It's all measured in present value. Social Security benefits coming in, retirement account withdrawals, regular assets. It's all as of the end of the year. So that's why this number is not exactly 50,000, because it's calculated in, we're looking at dollars as of the end of 2020. So we've got like so this is really in 2021 dollars. And we have a total lifetime resources measured again in present value. That's the value in the present. That's taking into account the fact that dollars received in 50 years from now don't have the same value as they do today, although in the current interest rate environment, they actually do. But in general, if you could put less money into the bank than $50,000 and end up with $50,000 in 50 years. So that's why $50,000 50 years from now, in general, when interest rates are producing a positive real return, would have a value today of less than 50,000, because I can put less than $50,000, maybe 40,000, into the bank and end up with 50,000 in 50 years. So anyway, this is a present value. It's the value today. If you had all that resources, all that money today, what would it be worth? And then over here, you see all the outlays, and you see these things are within $4 of each other. So this lifetime budgeting is very exact. And your spending is kind of partly it's fixed. You have to have, you're doing housing expenditures, as you've told us. You have to pay these taxes, federal and state. You've got retirement account contributions that you have to make, that you've told us you're going to be making. Medicare premiums are a real bite because for a high income household like this couple, they're calculated on a progressive basis, looking back to your modified adjusted gross income 2 years before you get before you're paying these Medicare Part B premiums. So you can get really hurt by having modified adjusted income 2 years in the past being even $1 too high. It can kick up your Medicare Part B premiums by $800 a year. Anyway, this is the lifetime payment that they're going to be making. There's life insurance premiums. Now, what's left over? Well, that's the discretionary spending. If I click next, I see that, okay, the couple gets to spend $3.3 million in lifetime, over their lifetime, measured in present value on discretionary spending, apart from all these required expenditures, taxes, housing, Medicare premiums, et cetera. And then if I go next, I get to see the value of the consumption smoothing. Right here you see annual income, which is in green, which is high until they retire, and then it drops down and then rises again a little bit after they get Social Security. And then and they start taking the retirement account withdrawals. But then there's also these fixed expenses spending, which incorporates Medicare premiums, mortgage payments, taxes, federal and state. And so that's all part, in this case, of the fixed spending. Now, if I click next, you get to see the discretionary spending. And you can see it's higher when the two kids are in the household. Then it drops down when the 17-year-old leaves at age 19, and when the 15-year-old leaves at age 19, which is a couple years later, the discretionary spending drops down again. So the program's taking into account the demographic composition. It's incorporating economies of shared living in the household, and the fact that kids are relatively cheap, about 70% as cheap, as expensive as parents. So that's, and then you can see that the discretionary spending in this case is $65,000 a year for the couple. And then if I click next, I see that we're getting the smoothing by having saving while the couple is still working, and then dissaving when they're older, and it's changing every year. And so now right here, I'm looking at life insurance recommendations, and you can see that it doesn't go on for, this is a recommendation for Sarah. There's no recommended life insurance for Jack because Jack's not earning that much money, so there's no need to insure his earnings. If he were to pass away, the couple, Sarah and the children, would actually have a higher living standard. And then you see it's declining with age. And then here we have some options where you can view your detailed results. Let me just click there. So this is the basic screen you're going to see with the results. You see here the lifetime budget. You see this is a living standard trajectory. This is the living standard per household member in orange, and that's perfectly flat because it's adjusting for family composition and size, and then the discretionary spending that's going to be associated with producing this living standard comes in here. If you look at the annual, let me do this, sorry, annual savings and withdrawal, this is like a budget, a balance sheet. And you can see that as you go through time, the couple is, first of all, accumulating assets and then decumulating assets. So they have negative additions to their assets, which is their savings. So that's in red because it's declining, or it's reducing the save or withdrawing from the regular assets. And then the key thing here is that the household is dying broke when both spouses pass away at age 100. So this is showing that the calculations are 100% correct, because if they weren't, the couple would not zero out at the very end, nor would their saving 1 year equal in the last year equal their assets the year before. So everything is, and then you can dig down and look at things like the spending overview. If you want to look at taxes, for example, you can see a breakdown of FICA taxes and federal income taxes and state income taxes. And there's even federal tax details, or basically a tax return here. You can look at a housing report and look at the equity holdings, look at all kinds of things. What happens if Jack, if let's say Sarah were to die, what would her estate look like? So plenty of things to poke around in. Spending report. You can look at the different elements of discretionary spending, housing expenditures, Medicare premiums, which would kick in when you're older, life insurance premiums, which are around when you're younger, retirement account contributions, taxes, and getting to a total. So this is fixed spending plus discretionary spending. Now, let me show you back at the, let me just run that base rate report one more time. I want to show you, I might go a little bit 5 minutes over before we get to the Q&A, so I hope you can bear with me, but there are a couple of quick things I need to show you. So once you've run your report, I'm just going to skip the details here. You can come down here and there's something called a progress tracker, and it's helping you do budgeting to see whether you're on track for this year. And so the first thing it's showing you is your total income for the 2020, the different sources. Then you have information about your fixed spending and your saving in 2020 based on the current plan that you've run. And then how much discretionary spending do you have to do? And if you use what's called the typical budget, we would say, okay, look, if you want to, based on typical patterns, you should be spending out of the 93,441, you should be spending $1,635 this year on utilities, and transportation should be $2,102. But of course, so you have these different categories, and what you're spending and how much you want to budget for the different categories might be different. So you can click Save and start tracking. So you can now go to this Transactions tab and start basically specifying how much you actually are spending in these different categories. So for example, if you said and this is really up to this point in time, year-to-date amount. So if I said that, for example, for life insurance premiums, or let me transportation, let me put in some crazy number, a big number like $500,000. Is that 500,000? And I would save it, and then I go over here. Well, this is a report that's showing you that, gee, you're off, here's your income. Are you on kind of on track on your income? How about your saving, your spending, household spending? But here we're looking at the discretionary spending, and this is way off track. You're getting this red warning sign that you're spending $528,000 based on what you inputted, and you only have $93,000 to spend this year in discretionary spending. So you better make an adjustment. Now, how could this couple? So anyway, this progress tracker, and we're going to have a video as part of the videos I mentioned. If you click on help, you can see get to all the videos that we have that are instructional videos. We'll have a video shortly that will help you see how you can use the progress tracker. And then over time, we're going to improve this whole budgeting aspect even more. There's going to be lots of improvements in the software over the next year or so. So this thing is only going to get a whole lot better, but there's nothing inaccurate right now. I want to make sure that everybody understands that every number you're seeing here has been produced with ultimate care, and we would not be putting out numbers that we thought were incorrect in any way, because we know people are relying on those numbers. Now, let me now talk to you about doing some alternative profile. Let me run a report that I haven't run yet, which is going to maximize the household's plan. I'm going to just maximize it over one thing, which is not optimizing retirement withdrawal dates, but just optimizing over social security, which is a word I should have learned how to say really well, social security, because I've said it about 20 million times, but I still screw it up. It's not easy, and probably if you had to say it 50 times in a row, you'd say it as well as I just said it. Anyway, this is the maximization plan. It's looking at all the possible, in this case, ways in which you could take Social Security, and it's going to take a few minutes, or at least a few seconds, to run this to come out with an answer. But this is a couple that's thinking about taking Social Security at 62, and the question is that an optimal thing in terms of getting them the highest potential living standard? So let's just see. It's running through lots of cases because they're a young couple and they have kids, so they have to look at all the possible child benefits. Hopefully this thing will run quicker. It seemed to run a little bit quicker earlier, but if it takes a while, I might need to come back to this in a moment. But let me just give it another minute or so. We have had, we have about 942 people on this webinar, so I really appreciate everybody staying. There it ran. So we just made for this couple with this program $635,000 in present value. That's an enormous improvement in their lifetime living standard. It's like a 20% or so. Look, they had 3.2 million. We just raised their lifetime spending by $635,000. It's like they found that on the street corner. Now, what does this mean in terms of their annual spending? Well, they get to spend more every year. It's not perfectly smooth. As you can see, the orange line is what they're doing now when they're taking Social Security, in this case at age 70. And their spending gets to go up about $7,000 a month by taking Social Security at 70 rather than 62. And every year it's higher, but here it becomes even higher because what they are is cash constrained and they can't borrow against those much higher Social Security benefits. So they have to wait until they reach 70 to get these higher benefits. So this is there's lots of other aspects of this maximization report that you can look at, but I'm going to leave that for a future webinar to really go over maximization. But I just want to show you two other things very quickly. What if the couple were to do the following, which is to move from California, move to Nevada from California. They live in California. They live in an expensive house with high property taxes and high taxes. In particular, Nevada has no state income tax. And maybe they live pretty close to the Nevada border and they can keep doing their jobs. Maybe they have jobs that they can do remotely and come into California ever so often to meet the bosses or whatever. So I'm going to run a comparison of this report. And the only thing I've changed here is I've had them specify that they're going to change their home and move to Nevada at the end of this year and buy a somewhat cheaper house, a $500,000 house, and put 20% down. And I'm now going to run this comparison report, and let's see what happens if we can make them. This is still keeping them taking Social Security at 62. So the question is there some independent advantage of moving to Nevada? And let's see if the program comes back with an answer there on that one. Should crank pretty quickly here. Alex, are you getting some questions coming in?
Yeah, we have lots of questions.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we're going to spend lots of time. We'll go, even if it takes to 4 o'clock, we'll try and answer everybody's questions. Not everybody obviously has to stay on board, but we'll try and get to everybody's questions over that period of time. Let me just see if this thing is taking a while to think. Maybe the Amazon web servers are a little bit slow today because I ran this earlier and it ran very quickly. So not quite sure why this is taking a bit of time. While that is cranking, I'm going to switch us to save time and to get to the questions. I'm going to move to this other, let's see. Yeah, we'll come back to this. Maybe Alex, you can run this on your side. I'm just going to switch to, I'm going to cancel this one right now and come back to that and run this other one I had set up, which is if they were to retire at 70. So I'm going to, sorry, at 65 rather than at 62, see what that does. I think possibly what's going on here, this thing is generally runs in like a half a second, these reports. And what I did for this webinar, just to be clear, is I used my hardwired connection in my office, which I've never used before, in order to make sure that I had good internet connection. But I think that somehow I've got bad internet connection as a result of using this hardwire because we've never had these things run this long. And I ran this before I connected it with a hard wire, so I have to apologize. But Alex, maybe what you could do is feed me one of the questions as we're waiting for this thing to run, and we'll start with the questions and come back to this.
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions, and some of them are more general and some of them are more niche. I think maybe the first question that many people have been referencing is what assumptions should we consider with the program now that in the midst of this crisis, given that a lot of the assumptions before the crisis might be either too conservative or too liberal for right now.
Too optimistic, yeah. Well, that's really good. What we're doing is sending out an email to everybody in about a week, which is going to indicate that we've changed the default assumptions, and we're changing the default assumptions on the rate of return from 2.5 down to 1.25 on the long-term rate of return. And also we're changing the default assumptions on the inflation rate from I guess it was I think we had 3.5 for the interest rate and 2.5 for the inflation rate. Now we're going all the way down to 1.25 for the interest rate and 1.25 for the inflation rate. So this means that we're assuming a zero real return, which is going to reduce the discretionary spending the household can do. So this is really a big blow to people's plans if we're facing a zero real return into the future. I would like to sugarcoat that and say not to worry about it, and the interest rates are going to go up, but they could also go down. In certain places, like in Europe and in Switzerland and in Sweden, interest rates have long-term treasury bond rates have been more like negative 75 basis points. So there's nothing that guarantees that we can't have interest rates that are really nominal interest rates that are negative, and even positive inflation rates, and have a negative real rate, let alone a zero real rate. So I think you want to use conservative assumptions here about both the earnings that you have and the rates of return going forward. It may take a year or so for the economy to get back into shape, for you to get back into your earning as much as you were. So one thing to do is to think about working longer, retiring later, or another option would be to if you have the capacity, the cash flow to pay for your pay off your mortgage by taking money out of your retirement account. Retirement accounts on a risk-adjusted basis right now, investing in the stock market might seem like the smart thing to do, but on a risk-adjusted basis, what we're learning from the markets are telling us that the real return on the stock market adjusted for risk is zero, because the stock market is so risky right now. So it's like playing the roulette wheel at the casino. An alternative to doing that would be, in Jack and Sarah's case, working longer, deciding to work till 65. Now, I haven't specified that they've lost any money, that they've become unemployed, but they might have. But you can see that there's a huge potential gain here from continuing to work. They can raise their lifetime spending, in this case, by $711,000 by working longer. And I'm sorry this thing took so long, but it definitely has to do with the internet connection, which I thought was going to be faster. It turns out it's actually slower to be hardwired relative to the wireless. But anyway, the key thing is they get to spend so much more, and it comes down to about $14,000 a year, which is significant for this couple. So that's one of the things you can do. You can run that alternative profile. You can set up as many alternative profiles. Just click here, put in a profile name, add the profile, and then all the data from the base case will be copied, and then you can just modify the base case inputs. While we're talking about other questions, I'm going to do the move to Nevada, because that's probably also going to run slow on this hardwired connection, which is really remarkable. I should have tested that before we got here today. Anyway, Alex, give me another question.
Well, I thought this was a sort of a niche question when it first came up, but it looks like we have
Alex, let me interrupt. Oh, yeah. This one did, for some reason, run really quickly right now. So now we have just moving to Nevada, downsizing slightly their house from $700,000 to $500,000. Of course, housing is a lot cheaper in Nevada. Paying somewhat lower property taxes and insurance, and having a smaller mortgage. They only have a 20% mortgage, so they're not paying at the mortgage rate they were, which was around 3.5%. Now they're around 3%. This makes a big difference. So, but also the income taxes are dramatically different between California and Nevada. So all these factors combined are making this couple close to $600,000 with no risk whatsoever. I mean, you can go to lots of financial planners and say, can you make me safely $600,000? And they will say, no, we don't know how to make you safely $600,000. Well, you can do it right here in this software. You can make lots of money. Maybe it's not 600,000 in your household's case, but if you think about moving to Nevada for this couple, working until 65, and also taking Social Security at 70 rather than at 62, and then also optimizing over the retirement accounts, they can dramatically raise their living standard, possibly increase it by at least 50% or more. So if you find you want to do something that you don't see how to do it, give us a shout, because we can probably figure out how to do a workaround that's very simple and get you to the right answer, if not in the most eloquent way. So let me then thank you all, remind you that we do have this option to, let's see, I'll go back to the PowerPoint, to go log in and go to my account and shoot off this URL to friends, colleagues, and relatives, and suggest that they consider buying the plan. If they do, it will expand your license by a couple months, and we really appreciate it. We really like to hear from you through time. And if you're a financial planner, please do sign up. Make sure your card is on our screen, and we hope that you all stay very safe during this horrible period. It's very dangerous. The deaths have just passed 70,000 Americans. This is worse than Vietnam in terms of deaths, and it's just happened in a few months. And it could become another couple of Vietnams if we don't be very, very careful. So definitely wear a mask, definitely stay 6 or 10 feet away from people, and be as careful as possible. So let me just leave it there, and I look forward to being with you in a couple more weeks when we do the next webinar, which will be about maximizing your lifetime spending, either in a robo way or manually, and then we'll move on in the next webinar to Monte Carlo and risk analysis. So thank you again. So I'll just sign us out here, Alex, or you want to sign us out?
Just